Hello friends, welcome to the ATC Double Cut. I'm joined today by my friend TJ Creamer from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, from Olympic View Golf Club. Welcome to the show again, TJ.
Micah, thanks for having me back. Always a pleasure to chat.
It is uh, a show that I wanted to record for a few reasons. You may have noticed, you may have gotten the ATC update last week. And if you did, if you got that newsletter, you would have seen that the podcast that we recorded back in May was the number one podcast and the number one video in terms of views since the last update. So clearly what we talked about back then was something that a lot of people were interested in, and I wanted to explore that topic further, which is basically how to have really good greens.
Yeah,
So
looking forward to
did
it.
did you read that newsletter, and what does it feel like to be number one?
Number one. Well, I won't ask how many numbers are there, if it's in triple digits of people or doubles or
Hun-
just singles, but
Hundreds, yeah.
hundreds,
It's
hundreds.
we're not in the thousands, but I will tell you, one, I got a notification from my podcast host that keeps track of how many times each episode gets downloaded, and the one that I recorded with Richard Forsyth from Royal Melbourne Golf Club, that one is now over 1,000. So,
Wow.
but generally my episodes are in the hundreds, but that's great. I'm glad that people around the world are interested in this kind of stuff. And so I wrote a blog post last week, or just this week actually, and the title of it is 2 weeks in August, and it's about a couple of things. It's about working at two consecutive golf tournaments. I'll put a direct link to this post so people can check it out because I included some photo galleries that I think are quite attractive, showing the grass conditions and some of the behind the scenes course maintenance images from the U.S. Amateur Championship at Hazeltine National Golf Club, where Chris Trittabaugh is the superintendent, and then the very next week at Keiya Golf Club in Japan, where Andrew McDaniel is the golf course superintendent. I collected data at those events and took some pictures, and the conditions were just superb. And the grass is really healthy too, as evidenced by the deep roots on both of those courses' putting greens. And I took videos of those and measured them with a couple of different methods of measuring roots to show that the grass is healthy and the results are good. And as I was writing that blog post, I was like, okay, I know TJ's just been at a tournament, and I'm going to let you tell us what event you were just at. But also, I realized, wait a second, I'm highlighting this because those results were so good at these tournaments with, I would say, atypical maintenance. Hazeltine hasn't been sand top dressed all year. They played the U.S. Amateur Championship, and they haven't top dressed those greens all year. Keiya Golf Club has been top dressed once this year. Neither of those golf courses had holes punched in the greens this year. And I know that that's an approach that I call the grammar of greenkeeping, and something that I write about, and I keep saying, you know, well, I wrote in the post, I said, I like to use the grammar of greenkeeping because I find this system is fun, for one. I'm not sure why, but keeping track of a few metrics and adjusting the work seems to make the work a little more enjoyable. Second, this is a logical approach. Everything done to the turf has a reason. Third, it works remarkably well. And it's not just at tournament places where this works. It happens at anywhere that this gets implemented. And I'm like, man, I don't think I can explain this as well as somebody like TJ who's actually doing it. And I know you're getting these good results too. So I wrote in the newsletter about I wrote in the newsletter last week about the grammar of greenkeeping. I said, they got these results at these courses by doing things like turf GVX, the growth versus expected, and keeping nutrients supplied by MLSN and stuff. And I'm like, man, I sound like a broken record sometimes just saying the same thing. And I realize for somebody that isn't already doing this, that's going to be, it sounds like mumbo jumbo. It sounds like jargon. It sounds like something that might be really complicated. And I'm like, I would love to have, let's have TJ on the show, and maybe you can try to translate, because I think you understand exactly what I'm talking about, except you also can do it, and you are doing it, and you're getting the results that I'm talking about. These are the type of results that people can get. So I guess that's the three reasons I wanted to have you on the show. You've just been at a tournament. You get these great results, and I think you can translate what I'm trying to communicate. And you were one of the top guests, one of the most listened to episodes recently, and I thought it would be great to have you back on. We can discuss that, and you can communicate some of this stuff again. So,
Yeah.
with that
Yeah.
introduction, well, perhaps you have something you'd like to say.
Yeah, so I did just return from St. Andrews. I was fortunate to be invited to go and work at the Women's Open that they hosted this past week. So my first time to Scotland, and then obviously my first time to St. Andrews. It really just eye-opening, exciting week for me to not only be on St. Andrews, but also tour some other properties, Kings Barnes and Carnoustie while I was there as well with the course managers, and be able to pick their brains on how they do things and how they get their exceptional conditions, and see a course such as St. Andrews in prime condition for a tournament was as a turf manager, I know golfers, the mecca of golf and home of golf, you go there, but as a turf manager to see St. Andrews was pretty surreal as well. So yeah. And then, yeah, transferring into the grammar of greenkeeping at Olympic View, my fourth year as superintendent there, and I've been working with you now for almost a decade, Micah, working through MLSN and GVX and OM246 and just continually seeing better and better results. And I think I know I talked to you about this. I sent you an email probably 4 or 5 years ago now that. There was a time where I was almost going to get out of the industry, and it seemed too complicated, and base cation saturation ratios and all that kind of stuff. And when I stumbled upon your stuff and started following it, it just made sense. It's just the practicality of it and the logic of it really drew me, and so much so that I just dove right into it. And yeah, today practice, I call it sort of either tweaking the knobs or pulling the levers, playing with all the little things slightly, and then able to see the response of those actions in the data, whether that's green speed or smoothness, and then through the bobble test or clip volume, that kind of thing. You see those almost right away. So very rewarding and very exciting. And like you said, it's interesting way to manage grass, and it's interesting because it's logical and makes sense. So
Yeah, I never really thought about the fun aspect, but it's actually real. I think for people that manage this way, I think they have a little bit more fun somehow. And
yeah.
and I think you agree somehow. And you wouldn't think that just changing the management to have a few numbers involved that you're tweaking could make it more fun, but somehow it does, because we are able maybe to see more directly the results of the work somehow. And
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. Like sometimes when you're if you're doing a lot of aerating or doing a lot of things to the soil, you're not seeing those roots grow an extra half inch the next day or whatever might happen with your whatever you're trying to do. But when you're seeing a response from a product that you applied the day before or 2 days before, and most of the time just nitrogen, or you're seeing let's go, our smoothness is just a little bit off. Let's add a double roll today, or an extra cut this week, or whatever it might be, and you see that right away response, and that response is perceptible by golfers as well, because I hear it when they're not great, and I hear it when they're great, and I can see it in the numbers before I hear it if something's off. So
did you
it correlates really well. So
did you see that video that I recorded with Frank Rossi where he's trying to argue that smoothness doesn't matter?
yeah, I was surprised by that, because that's been one of my challenges this year is I had a little bit of my speeds were still good, and if I was just measuring stimp, you would have thought everything was fine. But my smoothness was definitely off in May and June this year, and I could see it in the numbers, and I heard it from the golfers. So
Yeah,
um,
that's like
yeah.
Frank was trying to equate it to whether you make the putt or not. I said, it's almost like I think maybe Frank doesn't play as much golf or isn't as much of a golfer as he thinks he is, or he doesn't understand how golfers think the same way that I think I understand how golfers think. And the way that I think is, if golfers see the ball chattering or snaking or bobbling on the way to the hole, they don't really care. Of course, they care that the putt goes in, but they're still going to complain because they realize that those imperfections or blemishes in the roll could have led to the ball not going in. And if you look at the make percentages for professional golfers, even I think it's from 8 feet, that's a 50% make percentage. For amateur golfers, it's much lower. So what you have to realize is most golfers, when they've got a 10 or 15 or 20-foot putt, they're going to miss it. And then when they can see the ball chatter and snake, then of course they're going to attribute the miss to that. And so you want the ball to roll smoothly. And for
Hmm.
Frank to say that it doesn't matter, I think in the video I said I was shocked or I was appalled. I was aghast. I said Carl Scamenti would certainly agree with me. Um, yeah, I mean, I was reaching for all kinds of things. Um, and it's almost like we were talking about two different things. And I think Frank is just kind of putting on a show to make an entertaining video, which it was an entertaining video, and I appreciate that. But to be serious, like, we need to make the greens as smooth as possible, and that's where measuring the smoothness is really, really useful.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, the bobble test is completely visual, so it's not like I couldn't see that when I was, playing around with the putter or anything like that either. But to be able to quantify it on a daily basis and, the same green every day that we do it, and then, with my few trained team members that are doing the bobble test, we can see the data, the trends and the changes. And it's not just me going out every third day and whacking a ball with my putter and going, yeah, it's not as smooth as yesterday. It's like, no, today it's definitely better, or it's worse. But then it shows it on the tests that we do. So
So when you were away at the Open Championship, or the Women's Open Championship for 2 weeks, was it the
uh,
totality of the
12,
trip?
12, 13 days, I think. Yeah, yeah, in August, which is tough to be away for that long. So thanks to my two great assistants.
And yeah, so how did things hold up? Did everything stay in good shape?
Good. Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah. No, they're very on it. And you talk about fun in managing turf. Between the three of us, we definitely enjoy the numbers and back and forth. We did this and we saw that. Of course, while I'm away, I keep an eye on the numbers too to see where it's at, and I enjoy that. But the guys did a great job and able to just keep consistent with what we're doing. We did see this year we were pushing to see kind of how low we could go, and we kind of saw that in early August. We saw a little bit of a couple of greens getting a little bit thin,
Low
and we just
low with
nitrogen.
low with mowing height.
Low with nitrogen. Yeah. So we're just trying to see where we could get things and where the bottom was, and then we started to see some thinning. Applied a little bit of nitrogen, and we've seen things come right back to where we want. So it's again, we knew where we were, and then we saw some response from that, and then go, okay, let's just add a little bit more, and we're seeing right back where we want to, and nothing perceptible to golfers at all. So it's great.
And I presume that obviously you can assess this visually,
Mm.
and it's just not right. But you might also get some extra insight by looking at clipvol or GVX. Could you share what those, maybe what you saw visually that it was a little bit too low, and then also what you saw with the clipvol and GVX?
It was a funny one, and this caught me a little off this year. As I mentioned, we were playing around. We weren't seeing the smoothness we want, so we were doing a little bit more verti cutting than we traditionally do. So when we verti cut, we don't keep the clip volume from the verti cutter. But we do measure the clip volume on that day from the greens mower that's mowing right behind, which gets an elevated clip and more than just the leaf tissue off the top that it would. It's going to get some of that extra. So we were verticutting enough that we were getting that elevated clip often enough that it was throwing off our GVX. It was falsely high. So we were aware of that. So we didn't see it as much in the clip volume, and that's maybe where it caught us a little bit off guard. So that's something that we've talked about in the future is when we do verticut, maybe we don't use the clip volume from the greens mower that day. That might be something that we go and take the last clip volume and just use that clip volume for the day that we've already cut, just double it or not double it, but just replicate it again that day. So that's something that this winter, when I have a chance, I'm going to go back onto the verticut days and play around with that clip volume to see if we did that, what would that look like, and would we see a GVX that was lower? Because we weren't seeing the lower GVX, but then we did see the bit of thinning coming in those couple of greens. So
The GVX, of course, is growth versus expected. The new rebrand of what was the turf speedometer or speedo, then the growth ratio. Now we're just going with GVX, which has a ring to it. It's pretty easy to say.
I like GVX because last time we were talking, it was you had switched to Speedo again, and I was trying to use that term instead. But GVX sticks with me. And I guess one thing that I will say is that there's all these acronyms that go with each of these little pieces, but don't confuse that as this being complicated. We need to name them somehow, but they do all piece together really well. So I'm hoping that we stay on GVX here because I'm liking it. So
Yeah, I'm certainly intending. I'm certainly intending to.
yeah.
And I mean, basically, what we're talking about with this grammar is growing the grass at the rate necessary to produce the kind of surface that we want right now, and to try to avoid causing problems in the future. Like, we're trying to avoid growing the grass too fast, so that we're going to need to do extra coring or extra cultivation or extra top dressing or extra thatch management in the future, and it's something that we never achieve. We're always like trying to make it better. We're always trying to slow down the grass a little bit or speed it up a little bit. But somehow just paying attention to that, then making sure it's supplied with enough nutrients so it can be healthy, so we can minimize diseases, so we can have as resilient a plant as possible. That's important. So that's where the MLSN comes in. And clip vol and GVX, that's just related to how much it's growing. And OM246 is the acronym for measuring the total organic material by depth to find out how much it's changing underground. And that's pretty much it. And then I call it the grammar of greenkeeping because we have to call it something. And yeah, it's just a real logical approach. And I've got some seminars coming up this year in some different countries where I will have another attempt at explaining it. And yeah, I know you explained it in Bulgaria when you were over there last year at their Greenkeepers conference. And yeah, I think what I wanted to say and share really from the blog post that I wrote about 2 weeks in August is the conditions that I showed from Hazeltine during the U.S. Amateur, where I got to work with Chris Tredabaugh. There's Darren Bavard. I'm showing you the picture there. They're just superb conditions. And people might say, well, yeah, that's a big budget golf course. They've got 32 staff. That's not something I can do at my place. They have tournaments. And then I was at Kea Golf Club in Japan, where they have a smaller staff, and the golf course superintendent there, Andrew McDaniel, but they're producing great conditions. But for Japan, that's also like a high budget place kind of, and they have tournaments there and stuff. And people might say that's not quite something that I can do at my facility, but actually this is. And I think that's just that's the main point that I wanted to make from this particular blog post.
I think that's the beauty of it, Mike. And it would be interesting to to know the stats of the people that practice this and then where their budgets fit in the scale. But I think the appeal comes largely from greenkeepers who have lower budgets and don't have the ability to double cut roll every day, aerate twice a year, top dress all the time, apply expensive nutrient programs. You can do this program at a very, very, very reduced budget with reduced inputs of labor and have certainly equal or even better conditions often. So
Yeah, it's
I'll call myself a minimalist for sure, and this program appeals to me. But I think that the biggest thing is this is not about how low can you go. It's just putting the right amount to grow the right amount of grass to be able to handle the wear and tear and can continually produce a quality surface. So I might play around this year with seeing how low we could go just for fun, because it's been lower and lower the last 3 years now. This is the fourth year we've gone lower. And I think this year we found it, and then we'll be able to set our line for next year and go, okay, this is where we should be at this time, using the nutrient protection, or the nitrogen.
and the yeah, I mean the results just work so well because of that logic. There's the logic behind it,
Mm-hmm.
that the logic about the growth and playability and organic matter production in the soil and managing that and keeping track of the right things. It doesn't matter if you've got a one person crew or if you have a unlimited budget. The same logic applies of what you're trying to achieve
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to produce a turfgrass surface. And it even goes beyond golf. Of course, my specialty is golf. My expertise is in golf, but if this was a bowling green, or if this was a football pitch, or if this was a lawn, we can still define what the desired outcomes are, what the desired surfaces should be like, and then you can apply the same logic for any type of surface. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to pass on that I thought was really interesting. So while I was away, we had our club championship, and the Saturday morning of the club championship, for the previous 24 hours, we had 30 mils of rain, and then within the previous 10 hours, we had 20 of that within the previous 10. The rain stopped about 8 a.m. that morning. We had a couple of greens that had some puddling. I know those greens have inner drainage issues. It's not a surface thing. But that morning, golfers played. We weren't able to mow or roll that day, and they were really happy with the greens. They said, "Oh, even though that was wet out there, it was still fast." And the next day, we were mowing and rolling, and back up to quality, really quality greens for the second day of the club championship. And something that I've been concerned about is infiltration, and if we're going to see problems because we haven't done any typical aeration, and this year we haven't needle timed at all this year either. So. But to see that kind of response from the greens under what would be one of the more important events of the year, and to have them be able to continue play, or start play and finish no problem, and then have even better conditions the next day, was really rewarding, and really tells me that we're on the right path here. So
Now, put this in a little bit of context for me. This is in August, and remind us, have the greens been sand top dress this year?
yes, absolutely. We top dress about every 3 weeks, but we hadn't at that point. It had been about 6 weeks since our last top dress, in the effort to verticut more to help our smoothness. We were not top dressing because it just tended to bring up the sand when we verticut. So, but we do. I think our goal for the year is, off the top of my head, somewhere around 4.5 millimeters depth for sand on average, but it's actually varies between certain greens. Some greens get more and some greens get less based on their OM2 results from the last number of years. So
Yeah, how's that for applying the logic? You've tested different greens that are in different growing environments. Consequently, because of different growing environments, they produce different amounts of organic material in the soil over time. And you're now addressing that by applying different amounts of sand to those greens. And you'll see over time, at the next testing, you'll get an idea if that is making them more consistent or not. So, Yeah, that's cool. So you are putting sand, not punching holes.
Yeah, yeah. So this year was the first year we've done this different top dressing program for the last at least a year now, if not 2 years, based on the OM2 results. This year was the first year that we actually applied nitrogen significantly different to greens. So in the past, we'd had a few greens where we'd go out and apply just a little bit more N to those specific greens. This year, we went out and there's some greens that get none during a nap, and there's some greens that get one pass, and there's some greens that get two. So we're manipulating each nitrogen app, and to do that, we obviously only have to have nitrogen in the tank. So we're sacrificing, maybe if we're putting wetting agent out, it has to be a separate app now. And then I think next year the plan is that we're going to look at, instead of the GVX on a average of across all greens, we're going to set a GVX goal for each green, and then set nitrogen goals through the growth potential formula to for each green as well, as where we want to get those greens, because we've got some greens that we need to actually build organic matter in. They're shaded greens, they're smaller, they get a lot of traffic, so the traffic wears down those greens. So we're going to look to build up that OM2 number over the next couple of years here. So
That's that's very precise management. That's like the next generation way of doing things. So that's cool. I'm glad you go to that level of detail.
well, it's funny because it does seem a bit extreme, but when you've got the numbers, it's not hard to do. Like we take the clipping volume on every green, so basically it's just formulas and spreadsheets to keep track of it after that. And it might seem extreme, but coming from the Women's Open, the RNA was stimping every green and trying to get those greens within a very small range at the same speed. So a lot of that speed is going to be controlled by growth and density. So if we're managing growth and density to try and be very similar on each green, no matter the microclimate that they're in, and we do have different microclimates on our property, then I think we're going to do a better job of providing consistent green speeds for our members on daily play, without having to go stimp every green, mow this green, mow and roll that green, double cut this green, whatever it might be, to try and get them similar. So yeah, so again, just looking at the numbers that we already have, we can make management decisions to affect the outcome and not have to do the extra labor inputs to try and balance them out. So
That that makes sense.
mm,
I've got a couple more things I wanted to ask, and then we can wrap this up. You've got a Substack, and I'm subscribed to that. And I'll put a direct link to that in the show notes for anybody who isn't on that, getting that Substack. It's a nice newsletter where you're sharing some behind the scenes information about the type of work that you're doing and some of the innovative techniques that you're using.
mhm.
And you sent one out in a month or so ago. Uh, what was the date on that?
I think it's just a
August
couple of
20.
weeks ago. Yeah, a week ago.
Okay, that I'd read the one before. I did actually this one August 24th, just last week. So it's got a chart in there, or no, a table with the greens consistency. I thought you could explain that real quick. Do you want to bring this up,
Yeah,
or do you want me to bring this up?
after you bring it up, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So here is your here's your table. I'll let you describe it and tell me to move the screen around if I need to.
Yeah, so I started, with the numbers that we had. I started in 2022 with a blog or Substack post just about what our average green speeds were, what our average smoothness were, and then the missed targets column. So our target is to be within between speeds of 10 and 10.6 each day, and 8 or greater on the bobble test. So the percentage of days in that month that we miss that target with one or both of those. And then speed days greater than 10.6. So you can see the percentage of days in that month that we are greater than 10.6, and days that we were equal to or greater than 9, and the percentages there. So it's neat to have these numbers and be able to look back at 2022 when I know that we were not as precise with our programs and still working not only to learn how to implement the grammar of greenkeeping better, but for me, learning the property. That was my second year on the property. So it was interesting to go into 2023 and see improvements across the board. Even when you're looking in the total of the year from March through October, green speeds were up slightly, green smoothness were up slightly, the percentage of mist days were down, and all the numbers were improving. So to go into 2024, we had a really good start to the year. In March and April, you can see really good green speeds and really good smoothness, and that's about the last time that we spoke, Micah.
Mm-hmm.
And things were going really well. I think we were managing really well through the winter and really happy with the greens conditions. And then in May and June, we started to grow finally, which was great. We were happy about that. And you can see in May and June, our speeds were good, but our average smoothness started to drop down. And the biggest indicator for me was the far right column there. You can see 23% for May and June were days that we were greater than or equal to a bobble test of 9. You can see in May and June previously we were much double that number better. So to see the
Mm-hmm.
smoothness fall off was a little concerning, and we had some comments from members, of course, and I wrote a blog post back then in the spring and saying the numbers don't lie, and that's what I really like about the numbers. I can't hide behind the fact that green speeds are still good. The smoothness numbers are telling me that they're not there. So we started implementing some verti cutting. And for us, the challenge is the multi plant sward. We've got Poa annua, the ugly old annua or ugly annua plants, and then we've got some perennial Poa, and we've got some old pencross that the greens were seeded to, and we were interseeding now with some newer bent grass varieties as well. So there's a lot going on. So for us, the verti cutter seems to be the common denominator to equal things out. So we did some more verti cutting. We actually dropped heights this year as well from 125 we typically mow at, we got down to 110. And then you can see in July and August, we saw those smoothness numbers come way back up, and the greater than or equal to 9 numbers there, 97 and 84%. So significant improvements. So green speeds actually dropped down a little bit on average, but smoothness came up significantly. So I really enjoy this blog post. This is my favorite one. I do it every year in August, just to compare year to year our numbers, and it's really neat to see the improvements each year now, and know that not only are we doing it better, and I think we're doing it better, the numbers are saying that too, and the golfers are saying it as well. So it's great to see great conditions out on the golf course without having to pour tons of effort into each day either. So
That is great. I'm I'm glad that you explained it. It's really easy when we're watching the video to look at that. For people who are listening, it's hard to describe a table of numbers for people who are just listening to a podcast. So I encourage you to check out his that particular post, Chasing the Numbers 2024, on the Substack. So I'll put a direct link to subscribe to his Substack, and also I'll put to that post that TJ wrote. So anybody who's listening to this and wants to check out that table, you can easily find that. It's so predictable now that when this type of system gets implemented, one sees you dial the result, you dial the different things that can be changed, and then it leads to better conditions, which I've seen at Kea Golf Club, where Andrew's been doing this for many, many years, and we're trying to work with a grass that's quite difficult to manage, zoysia on putting greens. It's not your usual putting green grass, and to make those surfaces firm and to make those surfaces smooth and make those surfaces fast, there's a lot of different things that you can try, but some of the things that you might think would make the green smoother and faster and firmer don't actually do that. In fact, they move it the other direction. So we've been adjusting things year after year after year, and keep seeing improvements as we find out what works and what doesn't. And then at Hazeltine, Chris just had superb results, and they were so good right at the time of the tournament, right at the time the championship began. When they came for the practice rounds, everything was already right where it needed to be. And those greens were so consistent that there was no need to do any differential maintenance on any of the greens. It was every green got the same treatment. Every green got a single cut and a roll in the morning, and they were all consistent. It was really, really impressive to see. And
Yep.
Chris has, if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link to the video that Chris did for the USGA, produced by Brian Laurent at from the Superintendent Network. I got to meet him. He was out there, and he made a really nice video with Chris, where Chris explained uh, what did he call it? Maybe pinpoint precision or something, in which he's able to produce the results just by. He called it the growth ratio, but he's talking about the GVX, how he can just adjust the growth like that.
Here's a question for you, Mike, on both those properties. Like, I remember I've been doing this for a little while, and 20 years ago, we for a tournament, you'd try and plan it so your nutrients, your nitrogen might be tailing off for an event, and you'd be timing all these things just to happen to peak for an event right around that time, and then hopefully they'd hold through the event, and then maybe get some resuscitation afterwards. But for both of those events, I expect that they had those conditions for weeks or months before the event, and will continue on having those for the rest of the season without having to do anything extra to bring them there. Is that correct? Or
For Hazeltine, I think it's basically correct that
yeah.
they're quite similar to that on a regular basis, and in fact they had their club championship the weekend after the U.S. Amateur Championship. I think the only difference might be the rough height. The rough was allowed to grow higher for the U.S. Amateur Championship than it typically would be. At Kea Golf Club, because it's a warm season grass in a climate where it's dormant for 5 or 6 months out of the year, it's a little bit different because the grass is completely dormant and then it grows, and it's so hot there in the summer. And you need to grow some grass. You can't keep it at tournament conditions all through the summer, because if you don't grow enough grass during the summer, it won't be able to tolerate all the traffic.
Mm.
It's getting more than 20,000 rounds on dormant turf that's not growing, so it
Wow.
needs to
Yeah.
recover from that. So because of that, we do see at Kea it kind of the conditions are slower. There's more grass growing in July and early August, and then it's kind of brought down for the tournament. And then I would say the best playing conditions at Kea are September, October, and November,
Hmm.
in the and in the winter, as it's after the tournament. But
Hmm.
it's kind of tricky because you have to grow some grass prior to that in the summer.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that just what I was getting after it for me, and it sounds like for Chris in our climates and our turf types, it's not a lot of guessing to what's gonna get you there or take you there. For most part, you can put your plan together, and things are just gonna be roll throughout the season. And for me, a little bit different this year because we're playing around a bit, but I think the consistency is something that my members appreciate, is that day in day out we're staying pretty consistent, and even our maintenance practices we're not panicking and say taking a stimp in the morning and then say, oh, let's add an extra cut today, or and not surprised by anything. If we're off, we know why, and it's because generally we made a decision to do something a little bit different. But the numbers and the program allows you to just maintain consistency on a regular basis. So
Thank you, TJ. I want to ask one question before we end this episode. With your trip to Scotland and your trip to the home of golf, and visiting a few other courses, and also working the entire week at the Women's Open Championship, is there anything that stands out, just as like one particular memory of something that surprised you, or something that really had an impact on you? If you would just, if you had to just pick one thing.
yeah, so I think that's what I took out of the trip, and I've said it to a few people now, is that I might have been born to be a greenkeeper in the UK instead of a superintendent in North America. I just going around and seeing the properties, and learning about the practices and the programs, a very practical sense to it, and very straightforward programs that produce quality, consistent results, and it kind of reinforced how I'm working with the grammar of greenkeeping, and the success that we're able to achieve with that, and sort of put me at ease a little bit. So, and And then second thing, and this wouldn't be surprising, is just the openness and the friendliness and the willingness to share of the greenkeepers over there, whether it's with their time touring me around courses, or whether talking about programs, or discussing different practices and the value of them. Just a really solid experience, and gives me a great feeling about greenkeepers, not only in the UK but around the world, because I know we're all trying to achieve the same goal, and we're all trying to provide the best services we can. And it's an industry that continually excites me. So
What a way to close. Thank you for that great answer, TJ, and thank you for joining me on the ATC Double Cut today.
yeah, always happy to be here. Thanks again, Micah.
All right, everyone. Thanks again for listening, for watching. I will sign off now. For ATC from Tokyo, Japan, I'm Michael Woods. Bye-bye.